All right, welcome back to another live. I'm your host, Joseph Lewin, and today's guest is Finn McKenty. Actually, is that how you say it? I always asked before and I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's pretty easy to pronounce.
Awesome.
No
Yeah,
curveballs.
I this is what's good about a live show, right? Now,
Yeah.
here we go. But man, Finn, thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. I was excited to talk with you because I've been diving into YouTube a little bit, both with kind of a side hustle project I've been doing with I have a 5.5 acre property and I like cut trees and burn things and make stuff for my kids. And I've had a lot of success on the short form side on there. And then kind of been leaning more into how do I create long form video for that. And
Found out
also,
that short form video doesn't make any money.
yeah, unless you're going to like go viral over
Even
and over
then,
and over again, it's
yeah,
pretty tough.
even then, it's pretty tough.
So then, yeah, figuring out that side. And then how do we, I'm a B2B marketer. I've been in the B2B marketing space for quite a while now. So how do we take learnings from that and use it to grow B2B channels on YouTube? And, even how do we create video content for LinkedIn that's going to be effective? So
Yep.
talking to somebody who's done well on YouTube, made it, and yeah, just excited to have you on and chat about YouTube today.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I wanted to kick it off by just saying, with the channel like YouTube, it's been around for a super long time. And so I feel like a lot of people get the impression that unless you were an OG on YouTube, you can't make it. You can't really break into the algorithm anymore. You can't really make money through YouTube. So might as well focus on something totally different. What's your thought on that?
Well, email is also dead. SEO is also dead. Live events are also dead. Cold calling is dead. What else is dead? TikTok, it's too late to get in on TikTok. LinkedIn is dead. Personal branding is dead. I feel like everything is dead. So you might as well just give up, go dig a hole in the ground, cover yourself with dirt, and, that's that. It's the end. Don't even try.
So I'll take that as as a yes. You can still
Yeah. I mean, listen,
make money on YouTube.
anything worth doing is hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course YouTube's going to be hard. Of course. Like anything is hard. But I mean, I don't know. One of my clients started his channel, I think, in May, I believe, and he hit 3,000 subscribers in December, which I think is pretty good considering he had never
Yeah.
made any kind of video at all. And, I think he got 170,000 views or something, in that whatever 9 months or 8 months or whatever it is. I don't know. I think that's pretty good.
Yeah. So then what is a good expectation if you're going to get into YouTube? Because when we're in the marketing world, more and more, especially if you're in the B2B space or you're in B2B SaaS, more and more brands are saying, okay, what's the ROI on something? How do we tie this directly to sales? And I understand
Yeah.
why.
And
And
that's the reason why. So this is the reason why they will fail.
yeah, so maybe you could dig into that a little bit. Like, what
Yeah.
is a good, if you're going to pursue a channel like YouTube,
Yeah.
what is a good expectation to have as far as a return?
So
Yeah,
number
go ahead.
one is you got to get out of this like attribution sort of like myopic attribution sort of mindset is like we all everybody knows that attribution modeling is impossible. It is a nice guideline. It is a good aid to judgment, right? But it is impossible, like on a practical level, but also just on like an epistemological level. It is impossible. When we have multiple touch points, how do we decide how we weight each one of those touch points? That's not a
Yep.
mathematical question. That's a philosophical question, right? It
Yep.
is. Like multi-touch attribution, there is no objective answer to that. So, first of all, if that's the mindset you're in, like you need to break out of that because you've already set yourself up for failure by thinking that there's like an objective like coefficient that goes on each one of those touch points. So with that in mind, for YouTube, you need to understand like what your goal is for it. And broadly speaking, I would think of it, like you can kind of think of it in SEO terms. Although in general, I don't think that a search forward strategy is the best option for YouTube. But think of it, there's basically two viable options for YouTube. You can either go for a large audience with lower intent or a smaller audience with higher intent. And either of
Mm.
those are potentially viable. I'll give you two examples of that. There's some people I've talked to, like there's one guy I know who does like He does like implementation for this kind of like obscure European CRM, where he charges, you know, 5 or 10 grand a pop for that. And he's one of the very few people that makes content about that CRM on YouTube, and it's not popular. So his videos get whatever, 175 views or something like that. But you can be reasonably sure that everybody who's searching for, you know, your CRM name plus, you know, whatever Salesforce integration is probably trying to do that right now, unsuccessfully, beating their head against the wall. And they're like, oh my God, I just like, can we please just make these things work together? And so they see his tutorial, they try it, it doesn't quite work. And they're like, you know what, can we just pay this guy 5Gs to make it go away? And that's so he gets, you know, 6 figures of business a year from these videos that they get 175 views. So that's a totally viable strategy. However, it depends on 2 things. Number one, having an offer on the other side of it that is sufficiently high ticket that the low view count is offset by the AOV or LTV on the other side of it, and you can convert a sufficient number of those people to make it happen. So, in other words, like if his offer was a $50 piece of software, this wouldn't really be a viable option for him because he'd be getting 175 views. Even if he converted 50% of those people, which is obviously never going to happen, you know, that would only be whatever that is, a couple grand per video, whatever. So not going to move the needle. So that's option number one, totally viable. However, I would say most people in the sort of B2B world think that this is going to be their strategy, and it usually doesn't work for them. Usually because I think they don't convert enough. The conversion piece is what's missing. And there's lots of reasons why that might be the case. But, you know, you put out a video that gets 65 views, you're going to have to convert a lot of those people for that to be viable, right?
Yeah.
And usually that's where it goes wrong. The other way that you could think about YouTube as being viable in a B2B context is the other side of that, which is the large audience with relatively lower intent. So imagine like Y Combinator is a good example of this. They put out, so for anybody who's not familiar, like Y Combinator, you know, easily the most like well-known like startup incubator of all time, put out whatever, Reddit and Airbnb and all the big companies. So their actual ICP is startup founders, but there are not actually that many startup founders, and there are not that many people on YouTube even that are interested in startups. We might think if you're sort of in the LinkedIn bubble, it's easy to think that everyone cares about this stuff, but actually they don't. Yeah. Very few people actually have any aspirations of like raising money and like even know what a Series A means or any of that stuff. Like in the LinkedIn world, everybody does, but in the real world, nobody does. So Y Combinator, they could put out, you know, very dorky videos about term sheets and CAC to LTV ratio and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff that would probably get a couple thousand views because it's YC. But, you know, they've taken another strategy, which is to go much broader. And so like one of the videos they put out recently is called How to Make the Most Out of Your 20s. And it has like 250,000 views. Now, of those 250,000 views, how many of those are potential actual startup founders who are, you know, trying to raise money right now and might be, you know, looking to get into an incubator? Probably a very, very tiny fraction of those. But they probably are, that's probably not actually a problem. Like pipeline in the immediate term is probably not actually a problem for them. They get tons of people applying. So what they've done is now, you know, they're getting a couple million views a month on their channel. And what's that going to do over time, right? It's going to be a multiplier on everything else that they're doing. So that some kid right now who's 16 is watching this video that has no idea what a startup accelerator even is, much less what YC is, but he's going to watch some of these videos and going to be inspired by this and is going to get to know Gary Tan, and I forget the other co-host name, but going to get to know the people on channel. They're going to think it's cool. And then eventually, when they do decide to start a startup, they're going to go to YC or tell their friends about it or whatever. So I would think of it more because, you know, the thing to remember is that YouTube is a consumer entertainment app, right? And it has 2.7 billion monthly active users, I think, which means that literally everybody is on there, which includes your ICP. So let's say you sell to CMOs or something. The CMO has a YouTube account and they are on there. But when the CMO is on the YouTube app, they're not in CMO mode. Like they're not going to go, the most common use case for YouTube is you put it on when you're folding laundry or making lunch or something like that. So you open up your phone or your TV, scroll through the homepage, find something interesting. Okay, cool. I'll put that on for 15 minutes while I fold laundry. They're probably not going to put on, a product demo for some new attribution modeling like ad tech software. You know what I mean? It's not going to happen. But if there was an entertaining video about like, I don't know, the downfall of some e-com company in which, you told an entertaining story about this, and in the process of doing that, mentioned a couple times the topic of like attribution modeling and, that you owned a company that did that. Well, they might watch that and then they might go, this girl who made this video is pretty smart. Sounds like she knows a lot about attribution modeling. Who is this? And now you've gained a little bit of foothold in that CMO's mind. And they would have otherwise never known who you were. Now, are you going to convert them from that video? Probably not. But I think this is where a lot of B2B people go wrong is like, they're so eager. They're like overly eager for the conversion, right? Because they're not good at brand building. And so they want it. It's like, well, I want to publish a YouTube video and see, attributed sales 20 minutes later. And you're like, girl, that's not how this works.
Right. I mean, if you think about it, it's really building trust ultimately. And
yes,
let's just use cold email as an example, because this is something I've run into in this space quite a bit. Cold email doesn't typically get very good results, especially if nobody knows who you are. But do you know whose cold emails I'm going to open every single time? HubSpot.
Yep.
If I get an email from HubSpot, I'm going to open it.
Sure.
Or Salesforce or, wherever. I'm very likely going to open it. Salesforce, probably not anymore because they've way overdone it. But if if somebody from LinkedIn sends me a cold email, I'm probably going to open it, especially if they actually did an okay job. They personalized it. They did a tiny bit of research. I'm almost definitely going to open that. Mm-hmm. Whereas if it's from some company I've never heard of, by some person I've never heard of, very low likelihood, even if they do some personalization, that I'm going to open or engage or email back. I'm going to go look them up. I'm going to have to do a ton of research. I'm going to figure out, do I really want to engage with this person and be hounded by them? And all of that is because brand and trust, right?
So let's think about another scenario here. What if you actually weren't that familiar with this company, but you had heard other people talking about it? For example, Clay. I literally don't know what their product actually does, but I know everybody on LinkedIn talks about it. So if somebody from Clay inboxed me anywhere, I would open it because I'm like, I don't really know what this is, but everyone else seems to talk about it. So I'll check it out.
Yeah. And they're starting to do, that's because Clay's starting to do influencer marketing on LinkedIn. And so is Notion. And, they're kind of playing around with that idea, which is different topic for a different day. But the point is you're building trust, and it's very hard to attribute trust. And I mean, one thing that I really focus on a ton, which is kind of the opposite of what a lot of marketing people do, is you focus on the conversations first, not on the number of leads you're going to generate. And if you generate great conversations with people in the industry that are non-sales conversations, do you know what those lead to way faster than a bunch of random leads?
Yep.
Sales conversations.
Yep.
Give me 10 conversations where I'm just shooting the breeze and getting to know somebody in my industry. I'll take 10 of those conversations over 10, leads coming in from some random lead generation campaign.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Especially if those were introduced through somebody I know, or we have a mutual connection, or we're going to the same conference, or whatever the case is. Like those
anything just even slightly warm is already probably 80% more likely to lead somewhere than just some random cold lead dropped on your lap.
So it sounds like what you're getting at for B2B companies with YouTube is, think of it as more of a way to warm up the market.
Yeah, I would think of it
this. They've heard your name, and somewhat, like, obviously your content needs to match what you're doing to some degree, but maybe don't think so deep into like educating on your specific random niche, unless maybe a different example where that could work is if you are in a very, very small niche, like you do pressure testing for industrial pipes in this really specific thing. It's like, okay, that goes back to your first example where you create content that's
Yep.
very niche, and then only the people who are actually in that industry who would buy from you are going to ever even think to look something like that.
That could work. It's like that's just not really using YouTube what it's for. Could I use my iPhone to pound a nail? Yes, but that's not really what it's for.
Right.
Now sometimes maybe that's the only thing you got, and whatever.
Right.
But the pressure tested, the pipe pressure testing thing. Another way you could sort of take that would be to, and I would have to know more about the business to say which one of these is the better option. But another way you could take that would be if this person knows a lot about like industrial engineering, well, there's all these explainer videos of like how intermodal shipping works and stuff like that. Like if you know a lot about, like, I don't know anything about whatever, like pipes or whatnot, but there's probably some very interesting stories to be told there, like explaining something that sort of everyone is aware of, but nobody understands is very interesting. It could get millions of views. Like how does, I don't know, like, why is there steam coming out of the streets in New York City? Like that would be an interesting video.
Okay.
And if you made that sort of content, like that could potentially, that's the type of video that you can imagine coming up on your homepage and has like 4 million views.
I see what you're saying. And so you're almost, and I did see you talk about this. I forget what you called it, but it's basically like expanding. I've heard people talk about this before too, where you're kind of expanding to a broader audience.
Yeah.
So,
I called
like,
it niching up. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas most people are going to say, hey, you need a niche down. And I agree with that to an extent.
For the most part,
like
yes. But again,
marketing.
YouTube is literally not for that. Like it can work. Yes. But like but you're not taking advantage of the thing that is amazing about YouTube, which is the recommendation engine. That it takes the same amount of effort to make a video that gets 1,000 views or 1 million views. It's the same amount of work. The difference is that one of them gets picked up by the algorithm and the other one doesn't.
Something I've a lot of times stayed away from, but I'm definitely exploring more. I think that's along what you're talking about is tying what you're doing to something somebody already knows to explain what it is. So if there's a ton of searches for Steve Jobs right now, then maybe make a video about how productizing your offer makes sense with Steve Jobs. And I mean, obviously I'm not thinking through that at all, but you do some research, figure out how to tie those two together. Maybe you tell a story about how Steve Jobs productized something at Apple, and that's what made everything blow up. And if Steve Jobs is being searched for super heavily, even though what I'm doing has nothing to do with Steve Jobs, I'm going to have way higher likelihood that I'm going to ride the coattails of
exactly
that. Or, there's all these crazy drone sightings in New Jersey. So if there's a way that I could reasonably tie together something that I'm doing to that news story and go, hey, this is going on over here. It's a huge deal. This is why it's a big deal. And by the way, that's kind of how this thing over here works. And that's why we need to think more about this before it, this other thing goes off and we haven't been paying attention to it. But tying something that's already trending, something that's already going on YouTube, rather than trying to say, I'm just going to focus on my niche. Am I kind of...
Yeah, totally. Reaction videos are also a really good way to do this. For example, maybe you've seen like Wired and GQ and like Insider do these. It'll be like whatever tank expert reacts to famous war movies, and they'll like be like, well, this isn't really that realistic because this tank had these type of treads on it and they wouldn't really work in the mud. And it's pretty like technical stuff, and people just really like hearing experts talk about their thing, so if you're an expert in whatever, in pipes, like you could find, I don't know, you could find scenes from movies where people are like crawling around in the sewers and stuff like that, because that happens all the time. It's like such a trope in movies. There's something you could do there, if you want to like niche up. And again, it can be viable to do the sort of, low volume, high intent thing. But I talk to a lot of people where that doesn't work for them.
Yeah, especially depending on your niche. Hold on, I'm going to pull this up. I've got a comment shouting you out here. So my friend Ari, he also runs the show. Yeah.
Thank you for the support.
Ari's over here fangirling over Finn being on the show. So, shout out Ari. Thanks for that. So it's really interesting, and I think this kind of gets into storytelling overall. And actually, it's kind of interesting. I don't want to go too far off topic here, but I'm just tying something together. I always tend towards education. Like I like teaching people. I like that type of content. I go after that content myself. Like what I use YouTube for more than anything else is I have a problem, I research it, I find an explanation, I zoom through it as quick as I can, and I do it, and I use that for video editing and using new tools and whatever. So I use the platform that way primarily. But how can you tie that together with good storytelling? And I'm by nature not a very good storyteller, but if you're going to do marketing well, you've got to figure out how to tell good stories.
It's literally part of human psychology. Like narrative bias is a thing. Like our brains are like programmed to perceive, to absorb and retain information in narrative format.
Yeah, 100%. And we don't need to focus on that because there's tons of content already out about that. But what's been interesting is, as I gave a talk earlier this year about how one conversation can change everything, and essentially what we already talked about. Why not focus on having these great conversations? That opens up amazing doors when you just talk to the right people. So with that talk, I did it totally different than anything I've done. I barely gave any education. I gave like a couple bullet points of how to actually do this.
And I spent most of the time, loved it and told you how great and valuable it was, right?
I got clients from it. I had tons of people telling me. But the thing that was interesting, that's what exactly along the lines of what we're talking about, is I watched a bunch of Dave Ramsey's talks because he's clearly good at storytelling to get people to buy stuff from him. And he does this thing a lot where he'll start off with a random fact or an idea, and then he'll go like 3 layers down on that and start telling different stories about different things. And then finally, like 5 minutes into his talk, he makes a point off of the final part of that story to illustrate his point. And then he kind of goes on with the rest of the points of what he's saying. And it makes it stick in your brain. So for example, in one of his talks, he starts out by talking about Tennessee and how people in Tennessee are in the Bible Belt and they, act this way. And they kind of, there's all these different, things he talks about with that. And then he goes back to Tennessee and talks about the landscape and how there's all these hills and how the houses are up on these hills with gravel driveways. And he talks about getting out in the snow is horrible. So he keeps going around and about. And then he finally gets to this part where he goes, when I was a kid living in Tennessee, I got this red bicycle and I rode the bicycle down the hill. And, then he explains.
This sounds like Joe Biden's corn pop story.
So I'm not doing a good job of telling that story.
No, I don't. No, I get it. But
he goes through these like 3 or 4 different things to illustrate one point that he's trying to make, rather than focusing all of his attention on that point. And it's really interesting. Anyway, I encourage you to go listen to a couple of them, but it's kind of the same idea where we're saying, take this thing over here, and how can you take this random story over here and tie it to your point? And if people care about the story over here, they're going to care way more about what your point actually is than if you just try to make your point
and listen,
the story.
By all means, try making YouTube videos that are product demos or sales videos or just tutorials. If that works for you, awesome. Like, great, then you're good. But I think you'll probably find that it doesn't work. And then if it's not working, don't just keep doing that. Try something else.
Okay, so we spent a ton of time talking about that, but it is really interesting. And I think that's a really big key to be thinking about if you want to do YouTube is you got to tell good stories. You got to hook people in. You got to do all that. And there's tons of content out there about that. But like, stop thinking about how do I sell my product through YouTube and start thinking about how do I entertain? How do I get in front of the right people and get them to just listen to me talk?
And trust that if you do that, they'll buy stuff from you.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so, but I don't want to make this an hour-long episode, even though we definitely could.
Yeah.
I want to touch on a couple other points. So if you're going to get started with YouTube, what is a good expectation for how long it would take before you could actually make money through YouTube? What's a reasonable expectation?
Well, it depends on your monetization strategy. So, you can monetize through AdSense, and for AdSense, there are specific requirements that YouTube has for that. It's been a while since I had to go through that, but I believe it's 4,000 watch hours in the last year and 1,000 subscribers, I think, is the requirement. So Some
Or
people
10
hit that.
million or 10 million shorts views
Yeah,
in a 90
right.
day period.
Right. Some people hit that on their first video. Some people it takes them a year. It's kind of hard to say.
Yeah.
You can't force that. I wish you could, but you just can't. I would say the expectation, that's on the AdSense side. In general, expect it's playing the long game. Be prepared to do this for 6 or 9 months without much to show for it, which can definitely be tough, can be demoralizing. But that's just sort of the name of the game. And you just have to trust that once it does start paying off and it snowballs and you do have that audience where you're like, wow, every time I put a video out, 10,000 people watch it. Like, that's pretty cool. I'm really glad that I spent that 9 months grinding at this.
So then when it comes to, if you were to start over with YouTube, recognizing that it's a long game. I mean, I agree. So I have that side hustle channel I mentioned, and I've been posting for 18 months about on that channel. And I posted 50, now these are shorts videos, but I posted about 50 shorts videos in the first 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
And most of them were getting 1,000 to 5,000 views on average at that point. And then I randomly in August of this year, so like over a year into posting, finally had a video that went viral and got 19,500,000 views in like 2.5 months.
Yep.
3 months. And I got 31,000 subscribers from that single video. And so it's like, you're posting all this content, not seeing anything happen. And then all of a sudden, you can have a video that blows up and gets you there. And
that's generally how it is. Yeah. You have one big breakthrough. And then once you have that breakthrough, as long as that's not a total departure from the content that you normally make, so if you make videos about hot air balloons, don't make one about race cars, because if that blows up, then people aren't going to watch your other videos. But typically you have that one big breakthrough and then you're off to the races. And so it's just like about staying, keeping your head in the game until you find that breakthrough.
So then, keeping that in mind, that this is a long game, you got to keep creating content. Another thing that's great about YouTube that I love compared to LinkedIn is they actually give you stats that are usable, that you can improve.
YouTube Studio is an incredible product.
So, I mean, that's where if you're going to be creating videos that you're looking into the camera and, doing that style of video, if you're doing that on LinkedIn, post them on YouTube, even if you're not trying to grow a YouTube channel, so you can get actionable insights about what you can improve. Like if 10% of people watch your video, you probably need a better hook.
Yes, although the YouTube audience and LinkedIn audience are fundamentally different. So there's stuff that might work great on LinkedIn that doesn't work on YouTube. And if it flops on YouTube, that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it isn't necessarily a fit for YouTube.
Yeah, no, agreed. But I would say that if you take what you learned from YouTube and you apply it to your LinkedIn videos, they're probably going to do better. Like if you see that only 10% of people watch your videos and you get a better hook and you get that up to 75% of people on YouTube are watching it, you're almost definitely going to get way more views and traction on LinkedIn.
Yeah. The tricky thing is that like topic is the most important variable. And most of the topics that do well on LinkedIn just don't have an audience on YouTube. Like anything B2B basically just doesn't have an audience on YouTube. So that's a pretty significant difference.
So if you were going to start over tomorrow on YouTube and you're growing a B2B business, or let's just even say, making it specific to like a service-based business like what you're doing right now, you're going to start a brand new channel, or like, what I do, you're going to start a brand new channel. What would you do? Like how would you go about trying to get started and build that channel up?
It goes back to what we were talking about before. The most important decision to make is, are you going to pursue that large audience with lower intent strategy, in which case it makes sense to have an offer attached to that that's kind of going to be a little bit more accessible, probably a lower price point, like a course or, an ebook or something like that? Or is it going to be a smaller audience with higher intent, in which case on the other side of that, you're going to have to convert a lot of people to a really high ticket offer? That's the most important decision to make, because that's going to inform the type of content that you make and pretty much everything else about the channel.
Yeah, that makes sense. Here, let me pull this up because this will give us a really specific example. So we have Marco who's asking a very specific question about kicking off a YouTube strategy.
Never focus on short form content. I'll tell you the 3 reasons why short form is basically bad. So number 1, doesn't make any money, as you've experienced. How much did you make off 20 million views on that short?
I wasn't monetized at first, so I made $1,500 from the video.
Yeah.
So it was like 15 cents per 1,000 views.
Kind of sucks, right?
So 10 million views is about
doesn't make any money, but people say, well, that's okay. I don't care about monetizing my channel. I'm here to, drive business for my company. Okay. Problem number 2 is that viewers of short form video typically do not turn into videos of long form video. YouTube will tell you this is not the case. It is, I promise you. There are some exceptions of people who make it work. I get it. But for the vast majority of people, that's how it works, because they're fundamentally different experiences. Like short form video is a passive format where you sit back and you're like, yep, nope, yep, nope, yep, nope. Just like doom scrolling and swiping through stuff. So the person who is watching that they do not necessarily want to watch long form content. And so that's typically what you see. So you get a bunch of viewers on your short form content, but it doesn't turn into viewers of long form content. Problem number 3 is that short form content is not very good at building brand or relationships, because number 1, it's short. And number 2, again, because of the nature of the experience, find somebody who, is really in TikTok and be like, so what have you been watching on TikTok? And they'll be like, oh, I really like this girl that cleans shoes. I watched like 20 of her videos last night. And you're like, cool, what's her name? And they'll be like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, you might get millions of views, but if you didn't make any money off of it, and it doesn't turn into viewers of long form, and it doesn't build brand, what did you really get out of it?
Yeah. And I will say, I mean, I have actually been fairly successful over the last year between YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. I've gotten 80 million views on these channels, and
I'd say that's more than fairly successful. That's amazing.
Super fun, and I'm enjoying doing it. But figuring out how to monetize that on, if you're getting those views with B2B, if I was getting those views focusing on marketing, I'd be making incredible money. But being able to get 80 million views talking about marketing is insanely hard.
In a sophisticated way. Yes. Not like Alex Hormozy, like sort of very broad, like funnel bro stuff. I mean, like talking about marketing in a sophisticated way, it's not going to happen. You're not going to get 80 million views on that.
Yeah. So then it's like, if you're going to get a huge amount of views like that, you've got to be focusing on something that's interesting and unique. Yep. And, that's what I'm doing with my channel. And it's fun. I am actually starting to get some brand deals and stuff like that. So that's fun, but it's a long haul to get there. And I'm creating stuff that's nobody else is doing anything like what I'm doing on there. So then from a marketing standpoint, it's very difficult to try to make that happen. Or I mean, from a B2B standpoint, very hard to make shorts interesting for that kind of an audience.
Yeah. So I would focus on long form content for, I forget the name of the person who asked, but I would definitely focus on long form content. You can do shorts, but don't optimize for them. Yeah.
So then, one thing that what I help clients do, and I'm just going to say this because it kind of helps set the tone for this question, is marketing is really hard. Creating video content is extremely hard. Creating long form content for YouTube is very hard to do. It's really hard to make it work. It's hard, you got to learn storytelling. You got to get good hooks. You got to learn how to be more animated. You really have to be an actor. You're like an entertainer and an actor in some ways. So you got to step away from yourself. And I know everybody's like, be authentic, but what if you're authentically boring? Then you got to learn how to.
If I was my authentic self on YouTube, nobody would ever want to watch me.
So you got to act, and you got to understand how to do that, and to do it in a way that's meaningful. You're not trying to, trick people or whatever. Right. But it's like you're an actor. That's what people are paying you to do, is entertain them, or whatever, just like they would do for an actor. And so having that understanding, not everybody can just go create long form content and be successful at it without getting practice. So what I'm typically helping people do is starting a live show to build their network and build relationships with people that they want to know that can help them grow their business. And having said that, when it comes to the long form video, like I'm usually discouraging people from doing that until they've been on video a lot, until they've practiced, till they've worked through some of that. And I'm just kind of curious your perspective. Like, do you think everybody should start a YouTube channel and just start creating whatever, get it out there, and then, you know, improve over time? Or is there a certain point where you would say, you know, it makes sense for you to start doing YouTube when you've created videos for LinkedIn for a long time and you kind of gotten used to that? Does that question make sense?
Yes. So lots of times I talk people out of starting a YouTube channel for a lot of the reasons that you've said. It is hard. If you pull it off successfully, I would say it's probably, I mean, almost definitely like the most powerful, like valuable marketing channel anybody can have. It's crazy. I mean, you could have a marketing channel that like makes 6 figures in revenue a year just off of itself, plus drive sales of other stuff. Like that's amazing.
Yeah.
But it's hard to get there. And if there's another way for you to hit your business objectives that's, you know, less of a heavy lift, I would encourage people to do that, you know? So in other words, like a lot of people, I'm like, yeah, you could do a YouTube channel that does this, this, and this. But probably if you just spent more time on LinkedIn, leaving comments and DMing people, you'd probably get there a lot easier. Yeah. So, you know, do YouTube if there is, and this just gets into the nuances of every business. If it is clearly the right move for your business goals, which, for example, like reaching a very large number of people who are, you know, a relatively kind of like accessible, like mainstream kind of audience, with an offer that is fairly accessible, like kind of low ticket ish kind of thing. If it makes, or if those make sense, then that's probably a good fit for you. Or if building authority around yourself is best accomplished through long form video content. For example, if you're an author or you want to get booked for speaking engagements or something like that, it probably, because I mean, what better way to prove that you're good at talking about something at length than by doing it and seeing that millions of people are watching you do it than YouTube. So if YouTube is, if you've looked at all the options and YouTube is clearly the best option, then you should do it. But don't start a YouTube channel for, you know, just to like check a box, because it's hard. And it's not just a box that you check. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And unless you're going to do all of the editing yourself, it's going to be extremely expensive also. Like if you are not in the video world, or you don't know how to find really inexpensive editors overseas that you're going to manage and be able to tell them exactly what you're looking for, right, you're going to spend a crap ton of money creating a YouTube channel also. So it's a
expect to spend
investment.
a couple $100 per video for editing, roughly speaking. Could be more, could be less. But so if you want to do 2 videos a week and you're spending $200, you know, per video, that's $1,600 a month in editing, which if you're a big company, that's nothing. If you're a solopreneur, that's probably a lot. You know.
Yeah. One other thing I'd say, and I'm actually kind of curious about this because you had mentioned this in your bio. I forget exactly how you said it, but basically like the people who don't want to be well known typically are the ones who need to get their message out there, and the people who do want to be known are typically the people you don't want to. You don't want their message to be out there. I'm totally butchering how you said that, but it was something along those lines.
I don't remember exactly what I said, but for me personally, I don't enjoy working with people who want to be in the spotlight because, you know, and it seems weird maybe because I have been in the spotlight a lot, but I don't really necessarily want to be. It's like I realize that I need to be, because the people I like working with are people who are smart, hardworking, nice people. And the binding constraint for their business is that not enough people know who they are. And so they kind of come to a place where like, man, I need to put myself out there more. More people need to know who I am, and I can help them do that. I do not want to work with people who sort of, you know, want validation from strangers on the internet to stroke their ego. Like, I just don't want to work with those people.
Yeah. So let me ask you one more thing. I know. Yeah. Let me ask you one more thing. So I think one thing that's really challenging for people who, let's just even say an author, like, so you've written a book and you go, hey, I want to become known for this topic, which again, I think is probably a good idea to do before you start a YouTube channel, is what do you actually want to be known for, and have a good idea that that's something that is actually marketable, that people, all that kind of stuff. Because if you just go start randomly creating a YouTube channel on a topic that maybe even gets a ton of views, but nobody wants to spend money on, that's not great. But let's say you've written a book, you've gotten some speaking engagements, you're a consultant, or you have a small consulting firm and you want to grow your reputation. I think one big challenge that folks in that space have is that they get to be very technical and educational. So how do you start making that switch to take your content and maybe you've got it formulated in how you've written in a book, or you've got the idea laid out well, you could give a presentation, but you can't just give the presentation you would have given in
you
person
can do that
on
once.
YouTube.
Yeah, you can do that once. So without getting into, this is sort of the essence of what I work with people on. So the short answer is that I think of it as everybody has a 3-part narrative. And if you convince the audience that all 3 pieces of this narrative are true, then they're ready to do business with you. And doing business with you could mean actually buying your product, or it could just mean that they consider you like, an authority in this space. And so essentially, like, part number 1 is some sort of differentiated point of view where you're like, this is how I see, this is just sort of an undeniable truth about the world. So for me, I say that visibility is more important than ability, meaning that opportunities go to people who are visible, not necessarily people who deserve them. And you want the audience's reaction to be like, damn, that's kind of true, isn't it? I'm like, okay, cool. Now that you're on board with that, that opens the door to the next thing, which is a mindset shift, which is, now that you understand that, you also understand why we need to change our thinking in the following way, which is that, for me, I would say everybody needs to have a personal brand, because visibility is sort of the currency for everything. Whether you're a consultant, full-time employee, entrepreneur, whatever, it doesn't matter. You need a personal brand because of that. And then you want the reaction to be like, damn, that's true, but how? And you're like, well, that opens the door to the third thing, which is the capability shift, which is the specific tool or process or other thing that they need in order to execute on that, which for me would be either LinkedIn or YouTube. And and in your content, all your content is chipping away at this narrative. Like, you're not trying to tell the whole story all in one video or post. You can, but like, that's not really the goal. What you want is, if somebody consumes a lot of your content, the body of work over the course of months or years, then they come to believe that this narrative is true. And once they do that, they're in. So I know that's sort of an abstract answer, but the details of that really depend a lot on the person and what they're trying to do and say.
Yeah, no, I like the way that you laid that out, because it's, in a lot of ways, I think of it as,
so like, for you could talk about like, live, like, everyone needs an audience, but video, like pre-recorded video is hard. So live is a good way to get started, build relationships. And like, cool, well, how do you do that? Well, here's the way to do it.
Right. Yeah. Or, for me, it's more like, hey, look, building relationships with people is actually how you drive business opportunities that are good and, non-transactional. So we need to switch the way we think from generating as many leads as we can to generating really high quality conversations with the right people.
And a live show is the way to do that.
Yeah. The easiest way to do that is to start a live show and invite the people you want to know on your show and build relationships. And then business comes out of that.
And give people an option to do it on their own. Like, this is what I always recommend to people, is don't say that you're the only person with the that holds the keys to this knowledge, right? Like, you're not the only person that knows how to set up, a live show. Definitely. You can do it. Yeah. You can go to someone else, or you can, figure it out on your own. That's cool if that's what you want to. But if you're the person who opened my eyes to this, then I'd be like, I'm just going to go to Joseph, because he obviously knows how to do it, and I trust him and I like him. So can you just tell me how to do it?
Yeah. And I've seen that happen from exactly that, right? Starting with that big idea that's, hey, stop trying to generate as many leads as you can and start trying to just talk to the right people, be a normal human, have good, genuine, normal conversations with people. It's amazing what happens. And, then going down that path. And I do have people who have taken what I've done and they've gone and launched their own live shows without paying me anything. And I have other people who have paid me to, at various levels to do that. So I totally concur with that idea. And it has to be super simple and easy like that. And that's where I've gotten tripped up, and where I think a lot of people get tripped up, is we want to be very technical and expertise oriented, not making those mindset shifts first, sharing the idea, helping people make the mindset shift. And then the technical stuff, they're just going to trust you on. You don't even have to convince them at that point.
Exactly.
If you're trying to convince on technical things alone, so hard to do that. And then you get into like comparison with other people who are doing, it's just so hard. Whereas if you've convinced somebody to change the way they think and the way they behave, then they get on a sales call with you, you're having a totally different kind of conversation than if they've gotten on with a competitor and then they're calling you to, price shop you or whatever.
Like interrogate you.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. I would love to continue chatting with you about this, Finn. We could keep going on all day, but man, really appreciate you coming on the show, and look forward to hopefully chatting with you some more.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for having me.